A daring team pulled off a smuggling operation that shocked federal law enforcement. At a time when the Drug Enforcement Agency was watching closely, they managed to get through the tightest security measures. They delivered two of the biggest marijuana shipments ever seen on American soil. The boldness and size of their plan made them legendary criminals. They smuggled over 100 tons of marijuana and made over $100 million from these dangerous operations. This is not just a story about smuggling, but about a grand plan so risky it was almost crazy. Along the long coastline of Washington state, which stretches over 600 miles with beautiful waters and scenic harbors, the 1980s saw a big increase in drug smuggling. During that time, while some marijuana was grown locally, most of it was brought in from faraway places in Southeast Asia, especially from Thailand and the Golden Triangle area. The Washington coastline was perfect for smugglers. It offered a huge area where they could blend in easily, especially when they arrived in different-sized boats. What better place to hide their illegal activities than in a harbor known for its busy commercial fishing operations, which were at their peak during that time? The harbor was full of huge commercial activity. Before salmon farming became popular, many fishermen went to the cold waters of Alaska and Puget Sound looking for the best catches. This constant boat traffic naturally caught the attention of law enforcement. Because of this, the DEA increased their patrols in the Pacific Northwest region. They worked under a special branch called the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force that focused on international cases. Their presence was obvious and constantly felt. However, despite this increased surveillance, one man and his team planned one of the most bold operations ever. They successfully smuggled two of the largest marijuana shipments in U.S. history, right under the noses of federal authorities. The boldness and scale of this operation became legendary. The 1980s were a time of flashiness, excess, and a strong desire for power and wealth. In 1986, an amazing 23 tons of marijuana were smuggled into the United States. Just as law enforcement was trying to understand the scale of this boldness, the following year in 1987 saw an even bigger plan unfold. Another 42 tons. In total, 67 tons were smuggled in less than 24 months, all while the DEA was watching. The huge size of these shipments left even the most experienced DEA agents in disbelief. Such vast amounts of marijuana entering American territory wasn't just a warning sign. It was like a loud alarm. This was no ordinary criminal operation. This was the mark of an organization working at its peak, showing a level of boldness and skill rarely seen in crime history. The money made from this illegal trade was astronomical. After distributing this massive amount of marijuana across America and paying all the operational costs, it is believed that the net profit was over $55 million. But the story doesn't end there. Suitcases full of cash would fly on private jets to offshore bank accounts scattered across the globe, from the secure chambers of Zurich's financial houses to the historic banks of London and countless other financial institutions worldwide. The mastermind, Brian O'Dea. In the center of this whirlwind stood one man, Brian O'Dea. The year was 1985. Brian O'Dea was a man once involved in illegal dealings who wanted to change his life for the better. Just as he imagined a cleaner, brighter future, an old associate called with a tempting offer. A massive stash of marijuana was available in Southeast Asia. The only problem was transporting it to the U.S. But the reward, potentially millions of dollars, was hard to resist. Despite his hesitations, Brian saw this as his ticket to a debt-free life, a golden opportunity that would solve all his financial problems and pave the way for a fresh start. Therefore, he decided to dive in and accepted the offer. Brian's first move was assembling his team. His search led him to Anacortes, Washington, where he knew a smart fisherman named Tony Franulovich. Tony was no ordinary man of the seas. He owned a fleet of boats and had years of experience in the fishing industry, so Brian saw him as a golden opportunity. Tony's boats, fishing equipment, and extensive knowledge could be the key to this bold operation's success. To add to this, Tony was a familiar face at the docks, commanding a majestic 105-foot schooner-style vessel. This ship was perfect for such operations. Tony's familiarity with the coastlines and his good reputation meant even the DEA agents gave him a free pass. His regular trips from Washington to Alaska were common knowledge. To the unsuspecting eye, this venture seemed straightforward. Transport fish crates to the dock, except instead of fish, these crates would be full of marijuana. So Brian explained everything to Tony and convinced him to join this massive operation. Next, he reached out to old connections, the Schaefer brothers. To the world, Bill and Chris Schaefer were flashy, wealthy businessmen, but in the shadows, they were global drug smuggling moguls. O'Dea successfully convinced them to fund the operation with a hefty $10 million. As the Schaefer brothers busied themselves bribing Vietnamese officials for smooth passage, O'Dea was focused on getting and preparing the vessels essential for this daring feat. The stage was set for a smuggling operation that would write its name into criminal history. It was a time of detailed planning. Brian O'Dea had invested in 2 ships, the Cathy B, a 100-foot vessel used for fish packing, and the Stormbird, which was later bought and equipped for the upcoming mission. Both boats were disguised to appear as innocent fishing vessels. However, beneath their decks, O'Dea and Tony had transformed them into marijuana smuggling factories, complete with weighing scales, packing equipment, and accounting facilities. Staffing was crucial. A total of 12 men were employed, 6 for steering the boats and 6 more to manage the marijuana below deck. O'Dea was fully aware that any leak to law enforcement would be disastrous. To ensure secrecy, Tony made each crew member swear an oath of silence. They were forbidden to discuss the operation with anyone, not even their partners or girlfriends. Any violation resulted in immediate removal from the team. Additionally, drug use was strictly prohibited. Even a small amount would get someone fired. The next step was to set up a safe communication system. O'Dea needed a foolproof communication system stretching across boats, cars, fixed homes, and even mobile homes, reaching as far as the South China Sea. Prepaid phones became their tool of choice for critical conversations. Back then, it was possible to receive calls on a payphone. They created a unique coding system for these secretive talks. Dictionary words or numbers said during a call would correspond to a specific page in a pre-made dictionary, making their conversations sound like discussions about ship parts. It was time-consuming, but it was their best shot at avoiding unwanted attention. After completing all these steps, the distribution of the shipments posed another challenge. So, to solve that, he bought some trucks for transportation. O'Dea reached out to trusted friends, those he had worked with previously, and sent them to truck driving school. Their routes, primarily between California and Washington, were repeatedly practiced to familiarize themselves with the road's details. With the vessel's crew, communication system, and trucks in place, O'Dea was now set to send his team to Alaska to import the first massive shipment of marijuana. The first shipment, 25 tons. In the darkness of night, a shipment of unparalleled scale was on the move. 25 tons of marijuana originated in the dangerous waters of the South China Sea and made its way northward toward the chilling Bering Sea. Here, the vessel Cathy B waited for its precious cargo. The hardworking crew moved the entire shipment to the ship and then set sail for the secluded bays of Alaska. Upon reaching the Alaskan shores, the crew carefully checked the cargo, making sure it was free of any mold. They weighed and repackaged the entire 25 tons into water-resistant fish boxes. By boldly branding their merchandise, every package wore their signature symbol. But as Tony and the crew were busy with their task in Alaska, an unexpected complication arose. O'Dea, the bold leader, realized they had a dangerous problem on their hands. One man in their team was addicted to cocaine. His flashy behavior involving limousines, women, and an excessive display of drugs drew unwanted attention. This reckless behavior didn't sit well with O'Dea, who recognized the unpredictable danger the man posed. Decisively, O'Dea separated him from the group. With a mix of bribery and stern threats, he was warned into silence, with warnings of serious consequences if he spoke a word. Clever deception. However, in a master stroke of deception, the crew came up with a brilliant strategy. As they unloaded the first pallet from the boat, they intentionally dropped it, scattering its contents and drawing a frenzy of seagulls circling overhead. This planned chaos was meant to distract prying eyes. Later, as they carefully loaded the marijuana into the trucks, O'Dea unveiled another ingenious plan. At the back of each truck, they left a space, filling it with aromatic rice husks, a natural mask to reduce the marijuana's distinct smell. Amazingly, in just 4 hours, 5 trucks were on their way to California. The merchandise sold like hotcakes, and the profits rolled in immediately. The operation's precision and efficiency were perfect, a masterclass in covert operations. They finished the first shipment successfully, but their success was short-lived because they were planning how to smuggle the second 42-ton shipment that was waiting for them back in Alaska. A sinister twist lay in wait. Unknown to them, the very man O'Dea had dismissed had turned traitor. The unhappy former employee, feeling spurned and betrayed, had become the weakness in their defense. This informant, with knowledge only an insider could possess, was now the looming shadow that threatened to bring their entire operation to its knees. This insider was a man with a past. He had previously had some minor troubles with the law, looked for a way to redeem himself, and struck a deal with the authorities. He provided them with a very important revelation. A massive mothership from the depths of the Pacific was speeding toward a hidden meeting point just off Alaska. The information that this man provided was very important and would have exposed the entire operation and destroyed all of O'Dea's plans. Now, the authorities knew everything, and everything had become clear. On the other hand, O'Dea, with his elite crew, was always alert. They were vigilant and always listening, but there was a big blind spot. Their equipment was deaf to the powerful signals of the big players. They only had the ability to spy on the signals of local authorities. They were unable to spy on the signals of the FBI, DEA, and ATF. But fate has its twists. As whispers of the approaching meeting grew louder, a ray of hope shone on O'Dea's path. A genius from San Diego, a tech expert, had a breakthrough. With the ability to break into those hidden federal frequencies with his spectrum analyzer in a whirlwind session, he reconfigured O'Dea's team scanners, tapping into frequencies that were once thought unreachable. To their amazement, these frequencies led straight to the heart of the U.S. federal authorities. O'Dea was armed with his new secret weapon in the form of a freshly programmed scanner in his car, which gave him the ability to precisely monitor the activities of the DEA and local law enforcement. While he was driving somewhere in the south of Anacortes, the scanner came alive with chatter. O'Dea's heart raced as he overheard talk of following a suburban vehicle. A quick glance at his rearview mirror confirmed his fears. The DEA was hot on his trail. With adrenaline pumping, O'Dea accelerated, weaving through back roads and dusty trails for what felt like an eternity. Every car he passed, every shadow in his mirror appeared as an enemy. After a grueling 8-hour drive, he found himself near Spokane. Every fiber of his being screamed caution. He dove into a quiet side street, urgently dialed a trusted contact from a payphone, and called one of their safe houses in Seattle. With every moment counting, O'Dea realized the seriousness of his situation. He had to relay the message and alert Tony, the man behind the wheel of the Stormbird who was now harboring a staggering 42 tons of marijuana in an Alaskan port, waiting for the secret signal to unload its hidden cargo and set the next phase of their bold plan in motion. Simultaneously, while O'Dea was escaping the DEA on land, Tony and his crew were docked at the fuel dock with their ship heavy with its illegal green treasure. While heading to make a call, the first word he heard was "hide," an ominous warning. The seriousness of the situation settled in. He sensed not only the immediate danger but knew that something was wrong and that the whole operation was in danger. As the DEA's watchful eyes took to the skies, their surveillance planes crisscrossed the Alaskan coastline, scouring the vast area for Tony's ship. The clock was ticking, and Tony had to act swiftly. Making a snap decision, he maneuvered the vessel stealthily into a secluded fjord, running it deliberately aground at the head of a concealed bay. The crew sprang into action. With the roar of chainsaws, they felled trees, using the ship's onboard cranes to haul timber, and they carefully draped the ship with timber and foliage, effectively blending it into the rugged surroundings. For added measure, they covered the entire vessel in camouflage netting. There, hidden from prying eyes and seeking radars, the vessel remained for nearly 3 tension-filled weeks. Aware of the advancements in technology and the heat signatures that could betray them, they shut down all generators, plunging their floating hideout into cold darkness. Instead, they relied on simple old-school Coleman stoves to sustain them, avoiding any electronic trace. Their instincts were sharp. They felt the ever-present gaze of the Coast Guard and sensed the net tightening around them. With the boat masterfully concealed and momentarily out of danger, Odea was already several steps ahead. He urgently signaled Tony to leave their timbered sanctuary and fly to Seattle. An emergency meeting was set with the financier of their operation, the mysterious Bill Schaefer. Time was of the essence, and every move had to be calculated. But Odea wasn't one to leave things to chance. He needed inside information, a glimpse into the DEA's playbook. To achieve this, he recruited an unlikely ally, a corrupted ex-DEA agent. This disgraced investigator, leveraging old contacts and darker methods, was to unravel precisely how much the federal hounds knew of their operation. He told Odea that the feds were looking for them but had no idea about their exact location. The next day, in an undisclosed location, the 3 men, Odea, Tony, and the shrewd financier Bill Schaefer, met together, debating their next steps. The weight of their cargo and the impending danger had them on edge. Laid before them were their bleak options. First, bag the entire stash, a move that would see them abandon millions, a staggering $1 million in expenses. The mere thought was gut-wrenching. Second, throw in the towel, which meant either sinking the boat or setting it ablaze. But the vessel wouldn't easily sink. It was kept afloat by its immense load of marijuana. They thought about setting it on fire, but it would also inevitably draw attention, summoning the very Coast Guard they were desperate to avoid. The towering inferno that would follow would be impossible to ignore. In the midst of the meeting, Odea intervened and said, "My investigator came through. Despite the feds crawling everywhere, they've overlooked our trucking business. We still have an advantage. Let's use it and act now." In their desperation, they turned to a trusted ally who provided them with a new vessel, untraceable and unknown. They took it from a city named Bellingham and headed northward. At the same time, the Stormbird was uncovered and discreetly moved to a secluded bay on the southeastern edge of Alaska. The meeting was set under the cover of night. In the stillness of an isolated bay, the 2 ships met. The relief and joy on every face were obvious, a beacon of hope amidst the engulfing darkness. As the crew diligently moved the cargo, Odea and Tony orchestrated a cunning diversion. Aware that Anacortes Dock was swarming with watchful eyes, they routed their drop point to a less conspicuous location, Bellingham to the north. A trusted crew member steered the new ship on its stealthy course to Bellingham, Washington. Meanwhile, Tony anchored the decoy vessel in Alaska, laying low for another day. With fierce determination to eliminate any trace of their operation, they threw overboard every potential piece of evidence, from shrink wrap to machinery. The entire ship was scrubbed clean, ensuring it bore no trace of their secret operations. As Tony discreetly lays low in the remote areas of Alaska, Odea and his careful crew are miles away, absorbed in a high-stakes operation. They set about the daunting task of unloading the staggering 42 tons of illegal cargo in Bellingham, all while evading the watchful eyes of the authorities. Every movement is calculated, ensuring that their prized shipment makes its way safely to its next destination. Just a few hours later, their mission was accomplished. On the other hand, Tony and the Stormbird, now free of any trace of the contraband, were fully aware of the coming inspection. As they expected, as soon as they crossed the American-Canadian border, they were met by the looming presence of 2 American high-speed Coast Guard cutters, poised and ready to intercept. However, after searching the vessel, they didn't find any traces of drugs or any evidence against Tony and Odea. The DEA agents quickly realized that they had been deceived and that they had lost the battle. However, the investigators began questioning the ship's crew members one after the other, hoping that someone would cooperate with them. They started with the youngest, trying to intimidate them with threats of hefty penalties, stating that non-cooperation might lead to a sentence of up to 30 years in prison, given that this was a federal crime. Their interrogations began at the bottom of the hierarchy. They started by questioning Tony's nephew, who was still a young man. The search and investigation process was incredibly taxing for the investigators, as they had no concrete evidence in their hands. The search was painstakingly slow, requiring them to verify every piece of information and every word they obtained from the crew members. They looked into the trucking logs of the state, inspecting every stop and every gas station. It was a challenging and exhausting operation. At the same time, Odea was enjoying his victory, living a life of luxury and wealth in Santa Barbara, California. Years passed in this manner until Odea's birthday came around. During the celebration, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Odea, in the midst of the festivities, overdosed on cocaine. He was rushed to the hospital in a dire condition. Fortunately, and almost miraculously, he managed to survive the ordeal. At the same time, on the other side, investigators had spent 6 long years searching for any evidence or leads that would prove Odea guilty. Finally, they gathered enough to potentially send Odea to prison. One morning, as Odea was recovering in his bed at rehab, he heard a knock on the door. Thoughts raced through Odea's mind, and he immediately realized that he had likely been exposed. This would probably be his last day of freedom. When Odea opened the door, he found 2 agents showing DEA badges and carrying guns, who informed him that he was under arrest. His friend Tony was also arrested at another location. The court sentenced both Brian Odea and his partner Tony to 10 years in prison each. Meanwhile, the remaining participants in these operations, totaling 49 individuals, including the brothers Bill and Chris Schaefer, who financed the operations, were handed down varying sentences. However, all of them were of a shorter duration than those of Tony and Odea. After being released from prison in 1993, Brian Odea moved to Toronto, Canada, and began rebuilding his life. He wrote and published articles about his experiences in a newspaper, detailing his successful management of a fishing company, which included owning an airplane, an island, and a processing facility. He also spoke about owning and managing a fleet of trucks and running a marijuana smuggling operation that grossed over $100 million annually. Moreover, he expressed that despite amassing such wealth, it didn't bring him happiness. In other words, even with all this money, he still felt that his life was unstable and turbulent. And that was the story of one of the greatest smugglers in American history.